Awaken your spirit, chosen ones. Silence protects egos. Truth exposes contracts nobody remembers signing. Some people didn't realize how much of their stability depended on you pretending not to see what was obvious, the day you opened your mouth and called it out. Suddenly it wasn't vibes anymore. It was evidence. It was patterns. It was receipts. And now, it's not funny to them at all. Psychologists have found that when people get confronted with uncomfortable truths about themselves, their brains react almost like they've been physically attacked. They go into defense mode, denial, rage, or full victim cosplay, just to protect their self-image. You didn't just hurt their feelings, you shook the foundation of the character they've been playing for years. You were never just overly sensitive. You were the quiet observer, clocking the manipulations, the half-truths, the jokes that weren't really jokes, the "I didn't mean it like that" that always seemed to land on your neck. You watched, you tolerated, you tried to be the bigger person. Then one day, something in you snapped in the most holy way possible. You chose honesty over comfort, clarity over fake peace, and self-respect over being liked. Now they're spiraling. Not because you lied on them, but because you told the truth about them. They're rewriting history, sending paragraphs, posting subliminals, acting confused in group chats like, "I just don't know what I did," when you both know your outburst was just you reading out loud what's been written in their behavior for years. You didn't expose them on impulse. You exposed them on backlog. You weren't being dramatic. You were finally being accurate. And the funniest part? You didn't even drag them publicly. You just stopped covering for them privately, and somehow their whole persona started glitching in real time. This is what happens when a chosen one refuses to be the emotional mute in everyone else's story. Your voice walked into the room, pulled the rug, and revealed the mess they were hoping would stay under there forever. Now they're flailing, panicking, over-explaining, and doing everything except the one thing your calling out invited them to do: self-reflect. So in this video, we're going to break down exactly why they're spiraling now that you've called out everything, point blank, period. Why your truth hit them like a mirror they didn't order, and why their breakdown is less about you being wrong and more about you no longer being controllable. Get comfortable, because once you see what's really happening here, you won't feel guilty for speaking up. You'll finally understand why they were so invested in keeping you quiet. Number one, you weren't mean, you broke the spell. People love to label you mean, harsh, or cold the moment you stop playing along with the script that benefits them. For the longest time, you went along with the little lies. You laughed at the jokes that were actually disrespect. You brushed off the comments that cut too deep. You let things slide because you didn't want to start drama or be that person. On the outside, it looked peaceful. On the inside, it was quiet war. The day you finally spoke up, it wasn't random. It was the day your spirit got tired of carrying what everyone else pretended not to see. You didn't wake up and say, "How can I ruin vibes today?" You woke up and said, "I'm done lying to myself." And the second you opened your mouth and called out that behavior, the entire energy shifted. Suddenly, you weren't the nice, understanding one anymore. You were the problem. But here's the truth. If your honesty can break the relationship was already hanging on a lie. People who are real may feel uncomfortable when called out, but they lean in. They might need a moment, but they respect it. The ones who go into full meltdown mode, start gaslighting, playing victim, or calling you too sensitive. Those are the ones who were surviving off your silence. You didn't cast a spell, you broke one. You broke the unspoken agreement that said, "You get to act how you want, and I'll keep pretending it's okay." You broke the illusion that they were not that bad. You broke the performance where they got to be the hero, the saint, the chill one, while you quietly absorbed the hits. Now they're calling you mean because it's easier than admitting they were comfortable disrespecting you. It's easier than admitting your truth exposed their pattern. But deep down, they know you weren't being cruel. You were being honest for the first time without editing yourself to protect their ego, and once that spell is broken, there is no going back to pretending. Number 2. Your honesty exposed how much their peace depended on your silence. Their peaceful life was never really peaceful. It was just quiet because you were swallowing everything that should have been addressed. They were relaxed, smiling, unbothered, not because things were healthy, but because you kept choosing internal chaos over external conflict. They got to enjoy comfort because you were the one carrying the tension. The moment you decided to stop holding it in and actually say what was on your heart, their whole world shifted. Not because what you said was a lie, but because it stripped away the comfort they got from pretending nothing was wrong. Your honesty didn't disturb real peace. It disturbed fake peace. The kind of peace that only exists when one person shuts down their voice, their needs, and their boundaries. They weren't used to you being that direct. You were the one who let things go, who said it's fine when it wasn't. You were the one who gave second chances, third chances, and quiet forgiveness that nobody even asked for properly. They built a version of reality on the assumption that no matter what they did, you wouldn't really call them out. You might be hurt, but you'd stay soft, understanding, and quiet. So when you finally laid it all out, what they said, what they did, how it really made you feel, it wasn't just a conversation to them. It was a threat to the entire system they lived in. A system where they got to be good, chill, and not that deep, while you made yourself small to keep everything smooth. That's why their reaction feels bigger than the moment. They're not only reacting to what you said today, they're reacting to the fact that you might never go back to that silent version of yourself again. That scares them, because if you stop editing yourself to protect their calm, they have to either grow up and face their behavior or lose you. Their peace was never mutual. It was rented comfort paid for with your silence. And the day you spoke up, you showed who was really holding everything together. And it wasn't them. Number 3. You didn't change. You just stopped shrinking, and that threatened their whole identity. For years, you made yourself smaller to keep the peace. You dimmed your voice, swallowed your opinions, softened your boundaries, and edited your reactions to fit into their world. You minimized your feelings so their ego could stay comfortable. You weren't being mean or difficult. You were surviving in a system where your presence had to be quiet for them to feel safe. Then something shifted. You didn't suddenly become someone else. You didn't wake up and decide to be harsh or cold. You simply stopped shrinking. You stopped apologizing for existing the way you exist. You stopped softening your truth just so they could keep thinking the world revolves around their comfort. You stopped hiding your reactions, your needs, and your clarity. You stopped bending, and in that act, you became unrecognizable to them, not because you changed, but because you finally matched your space and energy to reality. And that's when the panic set in. Their identity depended on you being the smaller one, the quiet one, the one who could be molded or ignored without consequence. They built a version of themselves around your submission, the generous friend, the patient partner, the good person who always had it together. That version only worked if you stayed muted. The second you stopped shrinking, the carefully constructed illusion cracked. Suddenly they were forced to face the reality that they had been coasting on someone else's restraint. Their meltdown isn't about you being too much. It's about them realizing that the dynamics they relied on are gone. The comfort of having someone constantly adjust to their ego, excuses, and manipulations has vanished. And that's terrifying for them because their identity was never complete. It was propped up by your silence. You didn't need to change to shake them. You just reclaimed the space you've always deserved. Your presence, unapologetic and fully aligned with your truth, isn't a threat to you. It's a mirror that forces them to see the gap between who they pretend to be and who they actually are. And that realization, that's what makes them spiral. Number 4, their meltdown is proof you touched the exact wound they swore nobody could see. The way they reacted to you wasn't random, and it definitely wasn't about just that one comment. When someone completely loses it over something small, it's rarely about the surface issue. It's about the deep, unhealed thing your words accidentally or intentionally landed on. That's why their reaction felt so big, so dramatic, so out of proportion. You didn't just hit a nerve, you hit the nerve. They've spent years building a version of themselves that feels safe to look at. The good person, the supportive friend, the easygoing one. They've convinced themselves and everyone around them that they're fine, they're self-aware, they're doing their best. But underneath that image sits a wound. Insecurity, shame, jealousy, guilt, abandonment, or straight-up selfishness they refuse to acknowledge. That wound is the part they protect at all costs. So when you spoke, you didn't just call out behavior, you exposed the gap between who they say they are and how they actually act. You mentioned the pattern. You pointed out the disrespect. You connected their actions to their character in a way they couldn't brush off. And suddenly, they weren't just uncomfortable, they were exposed. That's why they clapped back so hard. That's why they tried to flip it on you, make you look crazy, too sensitive, or overthinking everything. That's why they cried, yelled, went cold, started telling people you attacked them. It's all defense. It's all cover. Because if they sit with what you said for even 2 seconds without deflecting, they'd have to admit, you weren't being cruel. You were being accurate. People don't shake, rage, and spiral over things that don't touch something real. If it was truly nothing, they'd laugh it off, correct you, or have a calm conversation. Instead, they went into full emotional lockdown because your words hit the exact spot they've been avoiding in themselves. Their meltdown isn't proof that you crossed a line. It's proof you crossed the line they drew around their favorite lie. And deep down, whether they admit it or not, that's exactly why they can't stop thinking about what you said. Number 5. You didn't ruin the relationship. You removed the emotional discount they were living on. For the longest time, they were getting the best of you without giving much in return. You gave time, attention, patience, forgiveness, and understanding while they contributed little, sometimes almost nothing, to keep things balanced. You carried the weight of the connection, softened the edges of their behavior, excused the disrespect, and tolerated the inconsistencies, all while their effort stayed minimal. They didn't even have to notice. They had the comfort of knowing you would always absorb the imbalance. When you finally called them out, it wasn't an act of destruction. It was an act of correction. You weren't cutting them off for the sake of drama. You were recalibrating the account. The relationship had been running on an emotional discount, a silent agreement that your energy, patience, and care were endless and free. By naming the truth, by pointing out the pattern, by refusing to swallow it quietly anymore, you simply made the bill clear. The balance they were enjoying without contributing was no longer acceptable. Calling them out didn't take away the connection. It demanded honesty and accountability. It forced them to recognize that your kindness isn't unlimited, that your boundaries aren't negotiable, and that respect is a requirement, not a suggestion. The relationship wasn't ruined, it was leveled, and the discomfort they're feeling isn't about you being harsh or mean. It's about realizing that the easy ride they've been enjoying is over. This is why their reaction seems so dramatic. They weren't prepared to deal with the truth. They had been living comfortably on your energy, expecting it to be free and endless. And now, when the emotional debt has been called, they can't handle the reality that the connection requires balance, respect, and reciprocity. You didn't destroy anything. You simply stopped letting them cheat the system. You updated the terms to match reality, and that truth is heavier than any lie they were holding on to. The relationship can survive, but only if it starts operating on honesty, equality, and real effort. Number 6, they're not mad you called them out. They're mad you can't be emotionally blackmailed anymore. For years, they relied on your patience, your empathy, and your fear of confrontation to keep them comfortable. Whenever they overstepped, they had a system: the tears, the guilt trips, the passive-aggressive digs, and the silent treatment. All designed to make you doubt yourself, apologize, or bend back into the role they needed you to play. You were the safety net for their excuses, the buffer for their mistakes, the person who would always soften the blow. Then you stopped shrinking. You stopped letting their emotional tactics control you. You stopped apologizing for things that weren't your fault. You stopped pretending their manipulations were accidents. And suddenly, the tools they've been using to bend you to their will lost all power. They realized that the old rules no longer applied. You were no longer the person they could guilt, confuse, or coerce into maintaining their comfort at the expense of your peace. That's why the meltdown isn't about the things you said. It's about the power shift. They're frustrated and angry not because they were exposed, but because the leverage they've been using for years has vanished. The tears, the silent treatment, the victim stories, the desperate attempts to make you feel bad or question yourself, these aren't authentic expressions of pain. They're strategies to pull you back into the contract where they always win and you always lose. The real panic comes from the fact that they no longer know how to manipulate the situation. They've counted on your compliance for so long that your refusal to be controlled threatens their sense of stability. You didn't give them permission to keep using you, and now they're realizing that your boundaries are firm, your awareness is sharp, and your patience for manipulation is gone. You didn't break them. You broke their access to control. Their anger is the echo of their own powerlessness, and your clarity is the mirror they've been avoiding for far too long. Number 7. You became dangerous the moment you stopped needing their version of you to feel valid. As long as you were trying to be good enough in their eyes, they were comfortable. They could shape how you saw yourself with a look, a comment, a bit of praise, or a bit of silence. If they approved, you felt worthy. If they withdrew, you felt like you'd done something wrong. Your mood, your confidence, and sometimes your decisions moved around their reactions. You didn't realize it at the time, but your power was quietly sitting in their hands. They had a version of you they loved, the humble, apologetic, always trying, always explaining, "I hope I'm not doing too much" version. The version that double-texted, over-explained, over-gave, and over-understood. The version that questioned your own feelings the second they didn't agree with them. That version made them feel big, necessary, superior, or in control. As long as you lived inside that mold, they felt safe. Then something shifted. You stopped chasing their approval like oxygen. You stopped asking, "Do you think I'm overreacting?" and started saying, "No, that crossed a line." You stopped performing for their praise and started valuing your own standards. You stopped living according to who they said you were and started moving according to who you knew you were. That's when you became too much, changed, different, or difficult. Not because you became a worse person, but because you stopped being a controllable one. When you reclaimed your power, your self-worth, your voice, your identity, their grip loosened. They could no longer rewrite events and expect you to agree. They could no longer label you and expect you to wear it. They could no longer decide you're the villain and expect you to grovel to clear your name. Your very existence as a self-defined person threatens the story they built, where they are always right, always above you, always the one who knows you best. You took back the pen, and now their version of you is no longer the default. That's why they're unsettled. That's why they're spiraling. You didn't become dangerous because you turned dark or bitter. You became dangerous because you woke up, stood up, and decided, actually, I'll decide who I am from now on. And nothing scares a controlling person more than losing the power to define you. Number 8. There, you're overreacting is code for you noticed what I was getting away with. For years, they've relied on subtle tricks to maintain control while keeping their conscience, or at least the public version of themselves, intact. Little lies, small manipulations, and repeated disrespect become habits when no one calls them out. They operate under the assumption that you'll absorb, excuse, or rationalize their behavior. The moment you stop doing that, their carefully constructed narrative collapses. Saying you're overreacting isn't about your reaction. It's about their fear of accountability. It's their final line of defense when the truth lands too close to home. By minimizing your experience, they try to rewrite the situation in their favor. Suddenly, it's not them who crossed boundaries, it's you who took it too far. They hope that if they can make you doubt your own perception, they don't have to confront the fact that for years they were comfortable letting you suffer quietly while they got away with whatever served them. What's terrifying for them is that your clarity exposes the pattern they've hidden from themselves. Every comment, every action you call out, every boundary you assert is a mirror reflecting exactly how much they relied on your silence. When they attack your reaction, they're desperately trying to close that mirror before they're forced to face it. They're panicking because the truth isn't just inconvenient, it's undeniable. Their defense mechanisms aren't subtle, they're almost predictable. Minimize, gaslight, distract, blame. Anything to avoid holding themselves accountable for what you endured silently. The moment you stop letting them rewrite reality, the only option left for them is confrontation with their own behavior, and that is uncomfortable, terrifying even, because it means admitting they were complicit in their own comfort at your expense. You didn't overreact. You didn't lose perspective. You simply woke up to the reality they hoped you'd ignore forever. Your truth isn't dramatic, it's accurate. And that accuracy is what scares them more than anything else. Number 9. You didn't expose them to be petty. You exposed them so you could stop lying on their behalf. For the longest time, you were their quiet damage control. Anytime they messed up, you were the one smoothing things over, explaining their behavior to others, translating their disrespect into they're just stressed, turning their patterns into they didn't really mean it like that. You weren't doing it because you loved lying. You were doing it because you cared, because you hoped they would grow, and because you thought protecting their image was part of being loyal. You became their unofficial spokesperson. When people raised eyebrows, you defended them. When others complained, you gave context. When someone tried to call them out, you stepped in with the "they're not usually like this" speech. Meanwhile, you were the one taking the hits behind the scenes. The jokes that weren't really jokes, the dismissiveness, the selfish choices, the hypocrisy. You saw it all, felt it all, and still chose to cushion it. But there comes a point where protecting someone stops being love and starts becoming self-betrayal. At some point, you realized their growth was only happening in your imagination. They weren't changing, they were getting more comfortable. Why wouldn't they? Every time their behavior caused damage, you were right there patching it up, softening the blow, making them look better than they actually were. So when you finally called things out, it wasn't a random outburst or a bitter move, it was a resignation letter. You were done being their unpaid PR team. You were done being the one who made them look mature while they behaved recklessly. You were done being the person who swallowed the truth so their reputation could stay polished. And that's why they're so offended. Not just because you spoke, but because your silence was part of their brand. You stepping back means people now see them without your editing. No filters, no softening, just them and their choices. Calling them out wasn't about destroying them. It was about freeing yourself. You chose your integrity over their image. You chose honesty over pretending. You decided, if you want to look good, you can earn it with your actions. I'm not protecting what you refuse to fix. You didn't become petty. You became honest. And for someone who's been living off your quiet protection, that honesty feels like the loudest thing in the world. Number 10. Your clarity killed the version of them that only existed because you kept doubting yourself. For the longest time, they were able to live as the good person in your story because you kept editing your own reality to protect that image. They could say something hurtful, and you'd tell yourself, maybe I'm too sensitive. They could dismiss your feelings, and you'd think, maybe I'm asking for too much. They could cross your boundaries, and you'd say, maybe I didn't explain myself well enough. Every time you doubted what you felt, you were quietly giving them room to stay the hero in a story where they were also causing damage. They didn't just benefit from your kindness, they benefited from your confusion. As long as you were unsure, they could keep wearing that "I'm a good person, I'd never do that" costume with full confidence. If you confronted something, they could twist it, minimize it, flip it back on you, and because you were already used to doubting yourself, you'd back down. You'd apologize, you'd soften, you'd let it slide, and that allowed their good person persona to survive another day. Then one day, your clarity came online. Not loud, not dramatic, just solid. You started looking at patterns instead of excuses. You stopped explaining away every red flag. You stopped taking their tone more seriously than your own truth. You trusted how your body reacted around them. You believed your memory, your intuition, your discernment. And the second you did that, their costume started falling apart, because their goodness was never based on consistent actions. It was based on your willingness to reinterpret those actions as harmless. Once you stopped doing the emotional gymnastics, their behavior looked exactly like what it was: selfish, dismissive, manipulative, or just plain careless. No more, maybe I'm crazy. No more, maybe it's just me. You finally admitted to yourself, no, this is real. It's been real. That's when things shifted. They felt that the old tricks weren't working anymore. The gaslighting didn't land the same. The guilt didn't sit in your chest the same way. The confusion that used to shut you down turned into confirmation. Your clarity destroyed the fantasy version of them that had been living rent-free in your mind, protected by your self-doubt. Now they're uncomfortable, not because you turned against them, but because you stopped turning against yourself to protect them. And without your doubt, their mask doesn't fit like it used to. Number 11. Their downfall isn't karma. It's the natural collapse of a life built on unchallenged behavior. For years, they thrived in a world where no one held them accountable. Every lie, manipulation, or disrespectful action slipped by unchecked. Every time someone softened the blow, excused their behavior, or swallowed their own truth to keep the peace, they learned that the rules didn't apply to them. They grew comfortable, confident even, in a system that rewarded self-interest and punished honesty. That comfort became their reality, and in that reality they could act however they wanted without consequence. But that system only works as long as someone keeps feeding it. It only works as long as people let them off the hook, apologize on their behalf, or ignore the harm they caused. Once someone stops enabling them, once someone refuses to be the buffer, the house of cards starts to shake. And that's exactly what happens when you stop being pliable. You remove the safety net, the unearned protection they were depending on, and suddenly their carefully constructed life, one that only functioned when no one challenged it, starts to crumble. This isn't a punishment you administered. It isn't revenge. You didn't cast a spell. You simply stopped playing the role they expected you to play. You no longer allowed them to manipulate your emotions, dismiss your boundaries, or rewrite reality to suit themselves. And the truth is, their downfall is a reflection of the reality they refused to face. If you live off other people's patience, forgiveness, or silence long enough, it becomes impossible to maintain the illusion forever. Take away their ability to bend the world to their comfort, and all that's left is who they actually are. A life built on convenience, manipulation, and unchallenged behavior doesn't have the structure to survive scrutiny. It collapses because it was never grounded in integrity, honesty, or accountability. It was only built to work as long as you let it. You didn't ruin them. You just made them live in a world where their behavior finally has consequences. And that's why they spiral, panic, and lash out. They are meeting themselves for the first time without the crutch they've been leaning on for so long. Number 12. You didn't go too far. You finally matched your words to the pain you've been hiding in your body. People love to say, you didn't have to say all that, but what they don't understand is that all that has been sitting inside you for years. That one moment where everything came out raw and unfiltered wasn't about a single event, a single comment, or a single day. It was the pressure of everything you've been swallowing, shrinking, and silencing finally reaching a point where it couldn't stay trapped in you anymore. You didn't explode out of nowhere. You overflowed from somewhere very real. For the longest time, your body has been carrying the truth your mouth was too scared to speak. The tight chest after a disrespectful comment. The knot in your stomach when they dismissed your feelings. The headache that showed up every time you had to be in the same space with them and pretend everything was okay. You called it stress, tiredness, or overthinking. But it was your body storing every unspoken boundary, every ignored hurt, every time you let something slide to avoid conflict. So when you finally spoke up and everything came out, every example, every pattern, every buried memory, it wasn't an overreaction, it was alignment. Your words finally caught up to what your body already knew. You weren't being dramatic, you were being accurate for the first time. You stopped protecting their comfort more than you protected your own nervous system. You stopped letting your body carry what your voice refused to name. That conversation felt too much to them because they only counted the moments you spoke, not the years you stayed silent. They didn't notice the nights you replayed things in your head, the times you rehearsed what you wanted to say and then backed out, the times you swallowed your feelings so you wouldn't make them uncomfortable. They don't measure weight in years. They measure it in minutes. You, on the other hand, know exactly how long you've been holding it. You didn't go too far. You finally went as far as the pain actually went. That was your truth catching up with your history. And if your honesty felt heavy, it's because it was carrying everything you weren't allowed to put down before. Number 13. You were never the villain. You were the mirror they tried to break so they wouldn't have to change. They've spent years carefully crafting a version of themselves that looks acceptable, reasonable, even admirable. They've relied on people softening the edges of their behavior, excusing their mistakes, and pretending that what they didn't matter. They've counted on silence, confusion, and your patience to maintain the image they wanted the world to see. And when you finally reflected back to them exactly who they were, without editing, without apology, without cushioning, it was unbearable for them to look at. That's why they lash out. That's why they smear your name, twist the story, or paint themselves as the victim. It's easier to attack you than to stare at their own reflection. They tried to make you the villain because admitting the truth about themselves would require effort, accountability, and change, the very things they've avoided for years. Breaking the mirror would be the easiest path, so they take it. But the truth remains. You didn't manipulate, exaggerate, or attack them unfairly. You simply stopped lying on their behalf. You stopped softening reality so they could remain comfortable. You stopped giving them the space to pretend their behavior was harmless. All you did was hold up the mirror and let them see themselves as they truly are, flawed, selfish, dismissive, or careless, depending on the situation. Deep down, even if they deny it to everyone else, they know. They know that the discomfort, the panic, and the attempts to rewrite reality are entirely because you showed them something they've been avoiding. They don't want to see it, but you forced a confrontation with the truth that has no shortcuts. You weren't cruel. You weren't petty. You weren't attacking for the thrill of it. You were honest, you were real, and you refused to carry their illusions any longer. And that honesty, that refusal to protect their image at the expense of your own truth, is what made you a mirror they couldn't handle. Number 14. Your role was never to save them from the truth. It was to save yourself by telling it. Somewhere along the line, you started carrying a job that was never yours. You thought if you were patient enough, kind enough, understanding enough, they would finally wake up, see their behavior clearly, and become better. You took their pain, their excuses, their childhood stories, their stress, and used all of it to justify why they acted the way they did. You kept thinking, if I just love them right, they'll change. But love was never the problem. Accountability was. You were never sent into their life to be a shield between them and the truth. That protector role that made you feel responsible for how they felt, how they looked to others, and how their story unfolded. None of that was your real assignment. That was you over-functioning, over-caring, over-carrying. It felt noble, but it was slowly draining you. Every time you swallowed the truth to avoid hurting them, a part of you was breaking. Every time you lied with your silence, your spirit felt it. When you finally told the truth, not the sugar-coated version, not the half-truth, but the real thing, it wasn't betrayal. It was self-rescue. You weren't trying to destroy them. You were trying not to destroy yourself. You reached the point where staying quiet was more painful than speaking up, where protecting their comfort cost you your peace, your health, your sanity, and your sense of self. You weren't chosen to be their emotional trash can, the one they dump on and never listen to. You weren't chosen to stand on the sidelines as a silent witness to your own mistreatment. You were chosen to wake up, see clearly, and walk away with your soul still intact. That doesn't mean you're heartless. It means you finally realize that your life is not a sacrifice zone for someone else's refusal to grow. If their world starts falling apart without your silence, your protection, or your constant emotional labor, that's not you being cruel. That's just reality catching up. You didn't curse them. You just stopped cushioning the consequences. Your job was never to save them from the truth. Your job was to stop abandoning yourself for it. The truth is simple, but few are brave enough to live it. Calling someone out, standing firm in your boundaries, and refusing to shrink for the comfort of others is not cruelty. It's clarity. Every meltdown you've witnessed, every tear, every gaslight, every attempt to make you doubt yourself is proof that you did exactly what you were meant to do. You didn't become mean. You became real. You didn't destroy a relationship. You corrected the balance. You didn't go too far. You finally matched your words to the weight of the unspoken truth you've carried for years. When you stop bending, stop excusing, and stop lying on behalf of others, something extraordinary happens. You reclaim your power, your peace, and your reality. The discomfort, panic, and spiraling reactions you face from others aren't signs that you were wrong. They're signs that your presence and your honesty have disrupted a world built on illusions, manipulation, and unchecked behavior. You were never their PR agent, never their emotional safety net, and never their mirror to be broken. You were yourself, and by being yourself fully, unapologetically and clearly, you forced the world, and them, to see the truth. This isn't about revenge, guilt, or winning arguments. It's about living a life where your integrity isn't negotiable, your boundaries aren't optional, and your voice isn't muted for anyone's comfort. Their spiraling reactions are a reflection of the system they've been thriving in, the one that only existed because you stayed small. By choosing yourself, you've rewritten the rules. You've walked away from silence, walked away from compromise that costs your soul, and walked into a space where honesty, clarity, and self-respect lead the way. So take this as a reminder. Being the truth-teller in a world of illusions is not easy, but it is powerful, it is transformative, it is liberating, and it is exactly what you were chosen to do. If this video resonated with you, make sure to hit that subscribe button to join the community, like this video to show your support, comment your thoughts and experiences below because your voice matters, and share this with anyone who needs to hear that standing in your truth is the ultimate power. Keep speaking your truth, because the world needs clarity more than comfort. Stay awakened, chosen ones.